It was a warm Friday evening in a big, beautiful restaurant called La Fontaine. The lights were soft and golden, and the air smelled like good food. People sat at their tables, talking and laughing while eating fancy meals. In the corner of the restaurant stood a shiny black piano. A soft jazz song floated through the air. A young woman named Deborah walked quickly between the tables. She wore a black and white uniform and carried plates of food with a smile. Deborah was 25 years old, kind, calm, and always polite. People liked her because she was sweet and gentle, but Deborah had a secret. She wasn't just a waitress. Deborah loved music. She loved it more than anything in the world. Since she was a little girl, the piano had been her best friend. Whenever she felt sad or happy or lost, she would sit down and play. The music helped her speak when words were too hard to say. Her mother, a strong woman who worked hard every day, had raised her alone in a small town in South Carolina. They didn't have much money. Deborah didn't have toys or fancy clothes, but she had an old piano. It was out of tune and scratched, but it was her treasure. Every evening after school, Deborah would play. Sometimes she cried while playing, sometimes she smiled, but always she felt free. As she grew older, life got harder. Her mom got sick, bills piled up. Deborah had to get a job. Music couldn't buy food or pay rent. So she packed her dreams away and moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, where she found work as a waitress at La Fontaine. Every day she walked past the grand piano in the restaurant. It was beautiful, shiny, and perfect. Sometimes when no one was looking, she would run her fingers across the keys just for a second. But she never played. That piano wasn't hers. Still, the dream never left her. That night, La Fontaine was busy. Tables were full, and the kitchen was loud with orders. Deborah moved fast, smiling at customers, refilling glasses and balancing heavy trays. She was tired, but she never let it show. Then something changed. The restaurant door opened, and in walked Leonard Grayson. He was a rich man, known all over town. He owned big companies, had big cars, and wore big watches. He always walked like he owned the room. That night, he came with 4 people, laughing loudly and acting like they were better than everyone else. Leonard sat down at a table in the center of the room. His voice was loud. He snapped his fingers to call waiters. He made rude jokes and laughed loudly. Everyone noticed him. When Deborah came to his table to take his order, he stared at her. "You look too quiet to work here," he said. "Are you shy, or are you just boring?" Deborah smiled kindly. "Just doing my job, sir," she said softly. Leonard laughed. "Well, aren't you polite? What else do you do? You must have some hidden talent." Deborah didn't want to answer, but she said it anyway. "I play the piano." "Oh-ho," Leonard said, raising his eyebrows. "You, a piano player? How cute." Deborah felt a little sting in her chest, but she stayed calm. "I used to play a lot when I was younger," she said. Leonard leaned back in his chair and laughed loudly. "Well then," he said, "play something for us. Let's hear this amazing piano talent." Deborah froze. Her hands felt cold. "Oh no, I can't," she said quickly. "It's not my place. I'm just a waitress here." But Leonard wouldn't stop. "Come on now," he said. "You said you can play. Let's hear it." "I really shouldn't," she said again, a little nervous. Leonard's voice grew louder. "So, all talk and no music? That's disappointing." The room grew quiet. People stopped eating. They turned to look. Some of the waiters paused too. Deborah felt like the whole world was watching her. Her heart pounded. She looked at Leonard's smug face. He wanted to laugh at her. He wanted to make her feel small. Then she remembered something, her mother's voice. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Deborah. You're stronger than you think." Deborah stood still for a moment. Then she took a deep breath. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll play." There was a hush in the restaurant. People stared. Even Leonard looked surprised. Deborah walked slowly toward the grand piano. Her shoes clicked on the floor. She felt like her legs were shaking, but she kept walking. When she sat at the piano, she looked at the black and white keys. Her fingers hovered above them, unsure. Then she closed her eyes. She thought of home, of her mother smiling while folding laundry, of the broken piano in the living room, of the night she stayed up late playing, just to feel safe. Then she began. Deborah's fingers touched the keys softly. At first the sound was quiet, like a whisper. The first few notes of Claire de Lune floated into the air. Some people didn't know the song, but they felt something change. It was like the music had magic in it. Deborah's hands moved slowly at first. She was nervous. Her fingers shook a little, but then something wonderful happened. As the music grew, so did her courage. She remembered all the nights she played alone. She remembered her mother standing in the kitchen, humming while Deborah practiced. She remembered how music had always been her safe place. The soft notes became stronger. Her fingers danced over the piano like they had wings. She wasn't just playing notes, she was telling her story. A story of being poor but never giving up. A story of working hard. A story of a little girl who loved music and never stopped dreaming. The restaurant became completely quiet. No clinking glasses, no talking. Even the chefs in the kitchen paused to listen. Leonard, who had once laughed loudly, now sat still. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. His eyes were fixed on Deborah, but he wasn't laughing anymore. Something in the music touched even him. Deborah didn't look up. She was lost in the music. She didn't think about Leonard or the customers. She thought about her dream, her life, and how far she had come. Every key she touched was like a heartbeat. Every sound was like a tear falling, but in a beautiful way. The song rose like a wave, soft, then loud, then soft again. People in the restaurant looked at each other with wide eyes. Some even had tears. They weren't just hearing music, they were feeling it. One little girl at a table whispered, "Mommy, she's so good." Her mom nodded, wiping her eyes. When the last note rang out, the room stayed quiet for a second. Everyone held their breath. Then clap. One person started clapping, then another, then another. Suddenly, the whole room was filled with applause. People stood up from their chairs. Some cheered, some whistled. Everyone clapped loudly for Deborah, her. Co-workers smiled from the back. One of the kitchen staff clapped with flour on his hands. Deborah stood up slowly, her hands still shaking. She looked out at the crowd. Her eyes were wet, but she smiled. She had done it. She had played not because someone forced her, but because she chose to. And she had played beautifully. Even Leonard clapped, but his claps were slow and awkward. He looked confused, like he didn't know what just happened. His smug face was gone. He had tried to embarrass her, but instead she had shown the whole room how powerful she was. Deborah walked back toward the kitchen. Some customers stopped her to say, "Thank you." "That was beautiful," said an old man with white hair. "You should be in a concert hall, not serving food," said a woman in a red dress. Deborah thanked them, still smiling, still shaking. When she got to the back, her manager, Mr. Hopkins, met her at the kitchen door. "That was unbelievable," he said, his eyes wide. "Why didn't you tell me you could play like that?" Deborah shrugged, wiping her hands with her apron. "I didn't think anyone would care." "Well, they do now," he said. "They really do." Later that night, when things slowed down and the restaurant began to empty, Leonard came over to her again. "Well," he said, "I guess there's more to you than I thought." Deborah looked at him. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just stood tall and said, "Yes, there is." Leonard chuckled, but it wasn't the same loud, mean laugh from before. This one sounded weak, like he knew he had lost. He walked out with his friends quietly. Deborah sat down in the back room for her break. Her heart was still beating fast. Her co-worker and friend Maria came over with a big grin. "Girl, you..." Slayed it, Maria said. That was magic. I almost cried. Deborah laughed. I almost cried too. Maria hugged her. You're more than a waitress, you know. You're a star. Deborah smiled, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. That night, when her shift ended, she walked home under the stars. The wind was gentle, and the moon was high. She felt light, like she could float. She walked past the park near her apartment and sat on a bench for a few minutes. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Mama, I did it." She could almost hear her mother's voice in the wind. "I knew you could." At home, she opened the small wooden box that held her old music sheets. Some were torn, some were faded, but all of them were full of memories. She sat by her window, reading them one by one, her fingers tapping on her knees like invisible piano keys. Tomorrow she would go back to work. She would carry plates, refill glasses, and smile at customers. But something had changed forever. Now everyone at La Fontaine knew who Deborah really was. She was not just a server, she was a pianist. She was a dreamer, and most of all, she was brave. The next day at La Fontaine felt different. When Deborah walked into the restaurant, people looked at her with new eyes. She wasn't just the quiet waitress anymore. She was the girl who played the piano like an angel. Her co-workers smiled at her. Maria gave her a playful wink. "Our star is back." Even Mr. Hopkins, the manager, treated her like someone special. "Deborah," he said, "I've been thinking. We should let you play more often, maybe once a week, every Friday." Deborah blinked. "You want me to play during dinner service?" "Yes," Mr. Hopkins said. "People haven't stopped talking about last night. You brought something magical to this place. I think they'll come back just to hear you." Deborah smiled slowly. Her heart felt warm. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." And so it began. Every Friday night, Deborah traded her serving tray for the piano bench. She would help serve food early in the evening. Then when it was time, she'd change into a simple but elegant dress and walk to the grand piano. The whole restaurant would quiet down the moment she sat. Each week, she played something new, songs that told stories, music full of hope and feeling. The guests loved it. People started booking tables just to hear the pianist waitress play. Some even left her notes with kind words. "You made my night. That song reminded me of my mom. Please never stop playing." One evening, a music teacher from a nearby school came to eat. After hearing Deborah play, she came up to her and said, "Have you ever thought about going back to school? You have a gift." Deborah laughed gently. "I used to dream about that, but life got in the way." "Well," the teacher said, handing her a card, "if you ever change your mind, call me. We have scholarships for students with talent like yours." Deborah stared at the card. A tiny spark flickered in her heart. Could she really go back? Could she study music again? Could she live her dream? That night, she went home and stared at the card for a long time. Then she pulled out her old notebook from under the bed, the one with her childhood music goals written in colorful ink. On the first page, she had once scribbled, "I want to play in a big concert hall." She added something new underneath, "I will." 1 month later, Deborah was still playing every Friday. The restaurant had more customers than ever. Her tips had grown too, and her confidence had bloomed like a flower in spring. One special night, something surprising happened. A young man in a suit came to La Fontaine and asked to speak to her after she played. She met him near the kitchen door. "Hi," he said kindly. "My name is Marcus Taylor. I work with a music foundation. Someone sent me a video of you playing here." Deborah blinked. "A video?" "Yes," he smiled. "It's going viral online. People are talking about the girl who played Claire de Lune at the restaurant. That moment touched a lot of hearts, including mine." Deborah felt her cheeks turn red. "I didn't know anyone recorded it." "Well," Marcus said, "I'm glad they did, because I'd like to help you." He handed her a folder. Inside was a brochure and a letter. "We sponsor gifted musicians," he continued. "We help with lessons, concerts, even travel if needed. If you want it, we can help you grow your music career." Deborah's hands trembled as she held the papers. She didn't know what to say. So many years she had waited for something like this. So many nights she had told herself the dream was over. And now, someone believed in her. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because," Marcus said, "you didn't just play the piano, you told your story through it. That's rare, that's beautiful, and the world needs to hear it." Deborah smiled, eyes wet again. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." The weeks that followed were busy. Deborah began music lessons again, studying with a kind older woman named Miss Eleanor. Miss Eleanor had white curly hair, tiny glasses, and hands that moved over the piano like silk. "You have a natural gift," she said after their first lesson. "We just need to polish it." Deborah practiced every day, before work, after work, even during lunch breaks. The piano at La Fontaine became her second home. She also began to write her own songs, soft pieces about her mother, strong ones, about never giving up, happy tunes about little moments that mattered. Her first concert came 3 months later. It was held at a small music hall downtown. The room was filled with strangers and friends. Her co-workers came. Maria brought flowers. Even Mr. Hopkins wore a tie. Deborah walked on stage in a long blue dress. Her hands still shook a little, but when she sat at the piano and played, her fear melted away. She played one of her own songs, a piece called Friday Nights. It was about that first night at La Fontaine. It was about the piano, the fear, the crowd, and the applause. When she finished, the room was quiet for a second. Then someone stood and clapped. Then everyone clapped. The whole room stood, just like that night at the restaurant. Deborah stood and bowed. She had done it again. Months turned into a year. Deborah played at bigger places. She recorded her first music album. She was invited to play on the radio and even on a morning show. People wrote articles about the waitress who followed her dream. She still worked part-time at La Fontaine, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The restaurant had become part of her story, and she loved playing there. Sometimes she'd see a little girl staring at the piano with wide eyes, just like she used to. She would always smile and say, "Do you like music?" And when the girl nodded shyly, Deborah would say, "Then promise me you'll never stop dreaming." One evening, as she packed up her sheet music, a man walked into the restaurant and stood near the piano. It was Leonard. He looked different now, quieter, softer. He gave her a small nod. "I heard what you've done," he said. "You're amazing." Deborah smiled politely. "Thank you." "I was wrong that night," he said. "Very wrong." She nodded. "Yes, you were." He looked down. "I'm sorry." Deborah looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "I forgive you," she said. "That night helped me believe in myself, so maybe in a strange way it helped us both." Leonard nodded and left quietly. Deborah sat at the piano once more. She looked around the restaurant, the warm lights, the clinking glasses, the quiet hum of life. She touched the keys and began to play. A soft melody filled the air. It was a new song, a song about hope, a song about rising up, a song about how one moment, just one, can change everything.